What's up, guys? Today we're working on the 96 Camry Wagon again. I'm going to be doing some stuff on the rear. I'm going to show you how to change the rear brakes, disc brakes that is, with pads, and the e-brake shoes, as well as the wheel bearing, because the wheel bearings on this are going bad. And it's a whole assembly with the wheel bearing and hub that I'm replacing. I'm not just doing the wheel bearing because it's cheaper and easier to just do the whole thing with the hub. So let me show you how to do it, and first let me show you what tools you'll need for this whole job. So what you'll need for this procedure, you will need jack and jack stands, torque wrench breaker bar, and a ratchet, as well as a small variety of sockets. All you need is 12mm, 14, 19, and 21. A couple small extensions. Now this you might not need for if you're doing just the wheel hub, but I am doing the brakes as well, so I need to compress the caliper with this. But ignore this. You'll need a screwdriver, a couple pliers just in case, and definitely a hammer, a wire brush, and some brake cleaner because you'll need to clean things up, as well as some sandpaper that goes with that. You can choose either sandpaper or a wire brush. I prefer both. Some paper towels to dry the brake cleaner off with. WD-40 will be your friend in this case because there's probably a good amount of rust under there, and some silicone paste to just put a little bit on the hub when you're done so that the brake rotor does not freeze on it and rust on it in the future. And as always, the parts are going to be linked down in the description, so if you need them as well as tools, check that out. Now let's get started. Alright, so first we want to jack up the car and remove the wheel. But before we jack up the car, we have to loosen the lug nuts, otherwise the wheel is just going to spin. If you have steel wheels, then you don't need this, but I need this to pry the lug nut cover off. Now I'm going to be using an impact gun, but it's very easy to break them loose simply with a breaker bar. Now that the lug nuts are broken loose, we can jack up the car. Now that it's jacked up, we can remove the lug nuts completely and remove the wheel. Now you get your jack stand, place it underneath. In this case, I'm only lifting one side, so I like to place it here on the subframe. That's the best place to have it because I have the jack on the pinch weld, so I can't use that. And you don't want to place anything under the rear bumper. It is not supported well, and there is no pinch weld back here. The pinch weld ends here. So the only other place to put it would be either under the knuckle, but that's not that great to put jacks under the knuckle and have it rest on the suspension or the subframe, and I choose the subframe. Okay, so now I have most of the weight on the jack stand, and the jack is just supporting it for safety. It is better to jack up both sides of the car, but I'm not on a level surface, so I prefer to only jack up one wheel at a time. I've already done the other side, so I'm only going to show you how to replace the parts on this side. However, the process does apply to both sides. It is actually recommended that you change these in pairs. Alright, so the first thing we want to do is remove the brake caliper, and that consists of removing this 12mm bolt that holds on the brake line, or brake hose I should say, as well as the lower bolt for the caliper, which is also 12mm. Undo that and then flip the caliper up. Alright, next we want to pull up on the caliper, just like that, and it has a slide stud right here, so basically there's no bolt at the top, it just slides out if you push it backwards. So push it straight out and then lift it out of the way. You don't want to let this hang by the brake hose, it will damage and collapse it. So what I do is I put it right here on the control arm and balance it between the control arm and the e-brake cable. Next we want to remove the pads. And this is a good time to inspect them. As you can see, these are worn out fairly equal. The thickness of the outer is similar to the inner pad, and the inner pad is not worn down very crooked. If it's worn out at a steep angle, then you might consider either new slide pins, or in this case it only has one slide pin at the bottom, and this is just a stud, so that might mean they are not well lubricated and it cannot slide equally on both sides, and it will slide at an angle as you step on the brakes and the brakes wear out. The other thing to look for is uneven wear, so if the inner pad is way thinner than the outer one, that means neither of your slide pins are working, and so then it is only using the inner pad to slow down the car as you step on the brakes. Next, we want to remove the caliper bracket so that we can take the rotor off. As you can see, it will not come off just like that because it's stuck here. It has 2 bolts at the back, and I'll show you in a second where they are located. Now, the best way to undo these is to use a breaker bar. An impact might work, but it's kind of difficult to get to. Sometimes if this bolt is put on backwards, so like if this nut is on this side and the head of the bolt is here, you might not have room for a breaker bar, so you're going to have to remove this bolt. I flipped it backwards at some point in the past so that I would have room for a breaker bar here because I didn't used to. So having said that, let's get the caliper bracket off. Okay, so this is where the bolts are located. One here and one here. 14mm socket and a breaker bar should do the trick. Once you've broken them loose, you can hopefully use a ratchet and a socket. You might need an extension for this one, and I do. I'm just going to go from behind the sway bar link in here. Now simply remove the bracket, and in my case the rotor has been off before, but if it hasn't, then you might need to hammer it, and hopefully in your case, if you do have this setup with the e-brake in the inside, then the e-brake hopefully isn't frozen on, because I had to, as you can see, there is no e-brake here for me, because I actually had to take a hammer to it, because whoever installed these last, they did not put this access hole to loosen up the e-brake in the right spot, so there was no way for me to insert a screwdriver to access the e-brake to loosen it up. So I had to hammer it out until it popped out of the e-brake, and that took a good 15 to 20 minutes of straight hammering at it and soaking everything in WD-40 so that it would slide on the brakes. Now, because of that, I cannot show you how to remove the e-brake because it's already been removed for me on both sides, so the car does not currently have an e-brake, but it's pretty simple, and if you've worked on drum brakes before, then you definitely know how to do this. If not, then you can just take some pictures with your phone so that you know how to assemble it later. What you'll need to do is there will be 2 springs going from the top of the shoes on hooking onto this metal part right here on the outer little notch of this bolt. There will be a spring at the bottom that holds them together. You'll need to fish that out, and there are also 2 pins that hold the e-brake shoes onto the backing plate. So you'll need to remove those. After you remove those, the brakes should come apart, and you should be able to remove them. However, there's one more step. The e-brake will be hooked onto this arm right here. Now in my case, this arm was frozen solid. It would not move, so I assumed that the e-brake was not working on this side of the car. It was only working on the other side. Having said that, I soaked it in WD-40 and smashed it with a hammer until it broke loose, and now I'm able to remove this, and you'll want to salvage this for your new set of brakes because the kit does not come with these unless you buy a different kit than I did. So you'll want to salvage this. It has a lock pin on the top that you'll need to just pry out with a screwdriver, and once that comes out, this should just pop right out. Like I said, if it's frozen, like it was for me, you can just use a bunch of WD-40 and a hammer, and if not, then you can probably use a torch on it and torch it, make it hot, and just pry it out, hammer it out, do whatever you need to do to get it off. On the bottom, it will be hooked onto the e-brake cable. You'll need to pry that off as well, and then there you go. Your e-brakes should be all taken apart. But if you're just doing the hub and bearing, you do not need to remove the e-brake assembly, and if you have drum brakes only, no rotor, you also do not have to remove the e-brake assembly or the brakes. There will be a slot in the hub right here where you can access each bolt individually. There are 4 bolts that go all around, 1, 2, 3, and 4. You will need a 14mm socket and a breaker bar. They are not very tight, so you may be able to take them off with a ratchet. I'm just going to use an impact just to speed up the process. But if you don't have one, that's totally fine. You can use a ratchet and a breaker bar. So as you can see, a couple of them are fairly rusty. These two seem to be very clean, the top ones. However, the two bottom ones do have some rust on them. I'll have to clean those up before I put them back in. The other side had all 4 clean bolts, no problem. Alright, so now that you have all 4 bolts out, if you are lucky enough, it will just come out. But if this is the original one and it hasn't been changed, then it's been on here for about 22 years. So you'll need a hammer, and after you hammer it outwards, it should just pop right out. There you go. Make sure you hold on to it because you don't want it to fall on your feet. And you are going to want to clean up all of this grease right here. As you can see, the grease is very hard. It's not supposed to be like this. This is rock hard. So it's bad. It was time to get rid of these. And I don't know if you can hear it. I'll bring it close to the microphone, but you can definitely hear the bearings grind on this one. So that's not okay. Now you want to get a paper towel and just clean everything up here. You don't need to go crazy, just simply clean up the old grease. Now you want to be cautious of the ABS sensor. If your car does have ABS, it's right in there, and you don't want to damage it. You don't want to hit it or anything. There is a rubber gasket here on this outer hub ring that you want to remove. The hub should come with a new one, and you should not be reusing this one unless you really have to, because it's old and it's worn out. So as you can see, water came in through the ABS sensor hole because for a while this ABS sensor was bad, and I think it somehow swelled up and it unsealed itself and let water go in, which is not okay. So we're going to have to clean that up and remove the rust, make sure it's nice and flat for the new hub, and just make sure that no more water comes through. So the best way to do that is to get some sandpaper, unless you have a circular wire brush or a drill attachment that can get in there. But you just break off some sandpaper and then you just go at it by hand. Spray it with some brake cleaner to clean it up. And wipe it with a paper towel to remove the brake cleaner. As you can see, this looks much better. It's not perfect, but it's better. I like to repeat this process on the outer ring of the knuckle here. Again, spray it down to clean it up. Alright, next we'll be installing the new hub. Now obviously they come pre-greased, as you can see in there. There's already grease in the hub. Alright, so before you put on the hub, you want to make sure that you put on this new gasket, and it will go around here. Now what I did on the other side is I actually took a little bit of silicone paste on my glove, just a little bit, and I actually spread it all around the gasket to make it slide on easier. I think I took a little bit too much this time, but I can always wipe it off with a paper towel. So just lubricate the gasket a little bit, and you don't want to use any other lubricant that is not compatible with rubber because it will degrade the rubber. And since I'm here, I'm just gonna put it on the outside. And the benefits of silicone paste and basically any grease is that it does not allow water to get in or get past it. And so if you put this on here, it will prevent any additional rust in the future. So just put the gasket on. Silicone paste will help it slide on perfectly. Just put on the hub. There we go, press it on and get one of your bolts ready and slide it on and thread it on by hand so that it holds the hub in while you get the other ones. Now this hub has 3 holes, 3 access holes, a big one, a medium-sized one, and a small one. I'm not sure what this medium-sized one is for. The small one is a hole that also goes through the rotor to adjust the Ebrake, and the large one is so that you can fit your 14mm socket to tighten up the hub. Now once you get one of them snug, don't snug it up tight at all, just bottom it out, and then you want to go to the other one on the bottom, go in a cross pattern so that you can seat the hub well, and snug that one down, or bottom it out I should say, and then go to this top one and then the bottom one. Alright, once they're snug, double check them all, because they will come loose as you tighten the opposite one. And then you want to torque them to 60 foot-pounds. Alright, so you want to get your torque wrench with the extension and the 14mm socket. You want to set it to 60 foot-pounds, and you want to tighten these in a star pattern, in a cross pattern. So start with whichever one you want, bring it to 60, go to the opposite one, bring it to 60, opposite, 60, opposite, 60, and then just double check them all. Once you're sure that they're all tight, everything else can go back together. At this point, I will put the e-brake on. If you have your e-brake already set and it doesn't need to be changed, then simply put the brakes back together and you'll be all set. Alright, so the next step is to attach this e-brake bracket off of the old brake shoe to the new brake shoe. It goes just like this. This will be on the inside of that side, so make sure you keep track of which side is which. Alright, so you put your washer on, you put your little clip on, and then after you put it on, what you want to do is with your pliers, you want to just crush it so that the ends meet. And that's what locks it on. And now, no matter what you do, it won't come off. It will move around, which is perfect. That's just what you want, but it will not come off. Okay, so the next difficult step is to get this e-brake cable attached to this bracket right here. So the way it works is it should slide in just like that. However, it is fairly difficult because this is spring loaded right here, and you'll have a hard time getting it on, and hopefully it won't take you too long. Now in your case, you might not need to even do this. You can keep this bracket on here if you're just swapping out the brake shoes, but mine, I had to completely take them off and now put these back on, so I had to remove this e-brake cable from the bracket. There we go. Once you get it hooked and started, you can just pry even harder and it should slip right on. Now to reassemble all of these, the easiest way that I found is to position these, and then you want to start from the outside in. So you want to have them hooked in place with their little pins back here so that they stay there, and then you can work on attaching any other springs and hardware that needs to be attached. Now what you want to do is the side that does not have the e-brake uses the straight pin, and the side that does have the e-brake uses the bent pin, because the e-brake, when you pull on it, this bracket will go right in this indentation. So that's why you need this one for this side. Now the way it all works together, and I'll show you because it's probably going to be hard for me to explain it while doing it. Now you have this little washer here that just slides on and holds the end of the what looks like a nail, but it's, you know, not a nail. Then you have this cup looking thing that holds the spring on the inside. Now in between here goes the e-brake shoe. So this will compress the e-brake shoe up against the backing plate. And then finally on the outside you have this little washer that locks in. So you put it in and then you twist it and it locks in place. Now the best way to go about it is to insert this pin first. Hopefully it doesn't give you too much trouble. The ABS sensor will be in the way, and hopefully you'll be able to maneuver it around it. If you find the right angle, it should just go in with ease. There we go. You want to get your e-brake pad shoe, your e-brake shoe, and with one hand, this is where it gets tricky, because with one hand you have to hold this part the outer part so that it doesn't fall off. Now actually what I found to be easier is to just, once you have it through the hole, you assemble it. You twist it and lock it in place. You push this spring up against it to make sure it stays locked, and then you simply slide it into this opening of the pad, of the shoe I should say. I found this to be the easiest way to go about it. Okay, so I got that one and I had to stop filming because the camera was in the way and I couldn't see what I was doing. But you got the idea, just slide it in and then you repeat the process for this side and then we move on with the rest of the installation. Now this side can be a little tricky because you have to not only go through the knuckle but also through this backing plate. So what I do is I put this washer between the knuckle and the backing plate and then hook onto it with my little pin here. I try and guide it through both holes, and then once I get the pin through, it will stay on the pin, and then work the pin in its location, and there you have it. It went through, and now basically you want to do the same thing, which is install this part, then the spring, and then the cap at the end. And then you want to pull them all together. Make sure that this is locked in place. You don't want it to explode on you. And there you have it. As you can see, I was able to, after about 10 minutes of struggling, I have them both on, they're both secure. Now I can start putting in the rest of the hardware. Okay, so next what we want to do is we want to put together this adjuster. So this adjuster is composed of 3 pieces, a threaded bolt with a cut at the end that you just simply thread on to this inner piece, and then this little stud that just slides right in. Now a lot of times these freeze up, and then because of that your Ebrake, or if you have drum brakes, your brakes will stop adjusting themselves, and that's not good. So what we want to do is, if your kit did not come with any grease, this came with white lithium grease, so that's what I'm going to use. But if yours did not come with grease, I would probably just use silicone paste. That should work just fine. And just put a little bit on these threads, just at the bottom of the threads, and then thread this on, and that will coat all the threads. Now this seems to have some rough spots in it when I'm threading it on, but hopefully those should not impact any adjustment, I should say. And now you want to unthread it all the way just to make sure that everything's okay and all the threads are coated, and it looks like they are perfectly coated. Alright, so that looks good. So I'm going to put it back in all the way. I like to start with the adjuster all the way in and work my way out. That way I do the same on both sides, so I have the adjuster on the other side set all the way in. I want to apply some grease on here as well, just a tiny bit. That's enough, just enough to make it slide around and not freeze up. That should be good. And now the way we want to install this is you can put it either way. However, if you have drum brakes, you cannot put it either way because it has a little arm that adjusts. But if you're doing this for the Ebrake, then you can put it either way, but you want to choose the same direction on each side. So the way I put it on the opposite side is so that when I pry it down with a screwdriver, or pry it up from the outside, it would tighten. So by that I mean it would expand the brakes and it would tighten up the brakes. So this is the way I want to put it in. If I flip it around and put it this way, if I push up, it'll tighten, and I'd have to pulled down to untighten. So it doesn't matter which way, as long as it's the same on both sides, so you don't get confused when adjusting. Now this is gonna get a little tricky, but basically this little adjuster will live right there in between those two slots. I cannot show you through the camera how to do it because the hub is in the way. However, all you do is slide it in, and then I'll show you how it sits so that you can understand. Alright, so as you can see, I got it in. That's exactly how it sits in there, from one side to the other. And here's a view from underneath. Alright, so now that you have everything else installed, all you have left to do is the springs. This one goes at the bottom. Again, I can't really show you, but it goes from that little tab over to that little tab, and I'll put it in, and I'll be right back in a second and show you exactly how it goes. Alright, so again, there you have it. That's how it goes. It hooks onto that bracket right there, and then it goes all the way to the other side, hooks onto that bracket right there. Now, it is normal for the spring to touch the adjuster. As you can see, they're making contact right there. But this adjuster is not an automatic adjuster. It's only manual, so it will only spin when you spin it with a screwdriver, in which case it is okay for them to touch because it will not spin when the car is moving. On the regular drum brakes, the automatic adjuster does adjust itself while you press the brakes or pull up on the Ebrake, in which case you do not want that to constantly be spinning on the spring. Alright, now the last things that we have left to do are three more pieces, and that's this piece right here with a spring. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to coat this in a little bit of grease just so it doesn't seize. You don't want to use a lot of grease. You don't want it to start flinging all over the brakes. You just want to use a little bit, enough to lubricate the mating surfaces so that it doesn't seize on you. Now the spring goes on this side. This bracket will go this way. The longer piece will go on the outside of the pad or of the shoe, and then the shorter part will go on the inside, and the part with the spring will go right into that slot right there. So hopefully, I'm going to take the spring out, but hopefully I can maneuver this in. There we go. And now these springs hook on like this on the inside, so you'll have to sort of maneuver them in. Alright, so next step is to put our rotor back. Now we want to put our rotor on backwards just for a second, only so that we can clean this outer surface. Grab your brake cleaner and just spray it down. Now you also want to spray the inside because in this case we have drum Ebrake shoes, and you want to clean out this inside material. To help dry it off faster, you can take a paper towel to it or a rag and just wipe it off. This paper towel will leave some residue, but that's okay. As you can see, it comes out pretty dirty. That's all the oil that they put on it to prevent it from rusting. There you go, spin it around, clean it up, and now we can permanently install our rotor. But before we do that, I like to just apply some silicone paste. In this case, I'm just going to use this little bit of lithium grease to just apply to this hub surface so that it prevents the rotor from freezing on there when it starts rusting eventually. So just get a little bit on your finger. Be careful to not get it onto the lug nuts, or lug studs I should say, because you don't want to coat these in grease. It will ruin your torque, and it will also increase the chance of your lug nuts coming loose by themselves. So just coat the outside of this in a little bit of lubricant of your choice. Again, you want to use something that will resist heat, because these do heat up, especially in the summer if you use your brakes a lot. So now what you want to do is you want to match this smallest hole in the hub. You want to match it with this hole on the rotor, because that is going to be your access hole for the Ebrake pads adjustment, or Ebrake shoes adjustment. Now I have new brake shoes for the Ebrake on the inside, so it's going to be a little tight, but that's okay. Get your caliper bracket. Now my brakes did not come with new hardware here for the bracket, but that's totally fine because these are in good shape, they're just dirty. So I'm going to take my wire brush and clean them up just a little bit. If they fall, that's okay. Spray them down with some brake cleaner. Alright, so once you have the rotor mounted, don't forget to spray the outside of it to clean that. You don't have to go crazy, just spray it down, and then I prefer to wipe it off. Now we have to mount our bracket. I'm not going to show you again where the bolts are. Now it's time to mount this. It might help to spray a little bit of penetrating fluid on these rusty bolts here, just to help slide them in better. Just be careful not to get it on the rotor. Then you get your 14mm ratchet and socket and simply snug them down. Now to torque these, I like to go to just about 60 or 70 foot-pounds. Alright, now that these are torqued, we can get our new pads and simply slide them in, work them into their brackets. Eventually they should fall into place. Alright, now that you have both of your pads in, it's time to take care of the caliper. Now what I usually do to the caliper is not only clean it up, and what you're supposed to do every time you take it off and replace brakes is obviously clean it up, make sure it's nothing is getting in the way, like this rust buildup and everything. And the caliper is totally fine, so the rust buildup is not concerning, but you also want to lubricate both slide pins. Alright, so what you'll need for this procedure is a drain pan, obviously your caliper, and an 8mm wrench. So if you are able to break this loose without putting the caliper back on, that's great. You might not be able to, so putting the caliper back on just temporarily might help you get the leverage you need. In my case, that is what I'm going to have to do. So just put this on, and you want to crack the bleeder because you don't want to bring fluid back into the master cylinder. It's just not good for the valves. Now hopefully this is not completely frozen on here. Just give it some taps, and there we go. It broke loose, so now you can work it back and forth. Remove your caliper again. Now you can just work it back and forth, because these are tiny bolts, and you don't want to break them, you don't want to strip the threads, because then it's new caliper time. And if you don't need one, why buy one? So just work this back and forth. The brake fluid should work its way into the threads and lubricate them for you. Now that we have this loose, I can actually spin it by hand, which is perfect. Grab your giant wrench, simply place it here, and gently squeeze down on this. It should start to compress. However, no fluid is coming out, even though it is compressing. So I'm going to keep removing this until fluid comes out. This caliper was a little difficult to compress because the little nipple for the bleeder was actually stuck. The bleeder itself was not, so I had to remove it and then put it back in as soon as I was done bleeding, or compressing I should say. So I'm considering bleeding the brakes after this because I don't want any air getting stuck in the system, but the caliper is totally fine. It easily went back in, so it's definitely good for another set of brakes. Now it's time to clean this mess up and then start lubricating all the guide pins. Now this slide pin here is seized, which is not uncommon, so a few taps with a hammer should unseize it from its housing. There we go. Tap it back the other way. Now you can push it by hand, as you can see. So you want to pull off the boot from the end of it and just push it through so that we can remove it from the caliper. Once it's removed, you want to clean it up. Just got some brake cleaner on there. Clean it up with a rag or a paper towel, because you want to put fresh new grease on it. Alright, now you want to take your silicone paste and you just want to put it all over the outside of it. Make sure you don't drop it at this point because it'll collect all the dirt that's on the ground that it falls into. I like to take a little bit extra and just place it right here inside of this hole, so that as this pin slides in, it can take that grease with it and coat the inside. Now you want to be careful about this boot. You want to actually slide it over the pin before it goes in, because you don't want to turn the boot inside out by accident. The fact that it's slippery makes it very difficult, but eventually it slides in, so it kind of helps you in the end as well. If you had a pick, that would be a good time to use here, because you could hold the boot with it, just don't tear it. There we go. Now simply slide this in. As you can see, a lot of the grease came out with it. And then just slide this boot over it, work it back and forth a few times, and that should be fine. Now we also want to lubricate this side, so put any remaining grease that you have, put some grease on here because we want to lubricate this side as well. Simply slide the caliper back on. Make sure it's seated well. You want to push this pin all the way in so that you can line it up with the bottom. And now make sure that the brake hardware stays on the pads. Get this long bolt that you removed, clean it up if you need to. Mine looks like it's pretty clean, so I'm just going to insert it. It already has grease on it, and it will get more grease from what is left over inside of that pin. Use your 12mm socket and ratchet if you need to. Now there are torque specs for these. I would assume it's under 30 foot-pounds, but I usually just make them snug and leave it at that. And there you have it. Job is complete. Make sure the brake rotor slides back in completely. It's time to put the wheel back on and take it for a drive. Now also don't forget, we have to pump the brakes a couple times because we put on new pads, so we have to seat the calipers in and make sure everything's good. Oh, and don't forget this bolt right here. Alright, just make it snug. Alright, and now we're done. Alright, so before we put the wheel back on, I'm going to remove my light and as well as my jack stand, because the way I have it positioned, I can take it out easier if the wheel's not on. So jack up the car. Get the lug nuts started by hand. You don't want to cross thread them. Alright, so as you can see, I went in a start pattern, in a cross pattern. You want to do the same when you torque them to 90 foot-pounds. So set your torque wrench to 90. And this might not be possible until you put the car back on the ground, but this is a good opportunity to test the e-brake. So now that I have firmly applied the e-brake, go ahead and torque them down in a start pattern to 80 foot-pounds. And then just double check it. Now put the lug nut cover back on if you have one. And after you put the lug nut cover on, don't forget to lower your jack. And that's it. job is complete. Now, as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I hope this video helped you out and you enjoyed it. So again, let me know in the comments if you have any suggestions.